Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
We're going to jump right into it because I know he is a busy individual, busy man, and thank you to Dr. Crow for adjusting his schedule here so we can catch up with him today because we'll be out tomorrow, but Dr. Crow just getting off the practice field this morning too. How's the team looking for your game going up against, is it the Illinois team coming up tomorrow night?
It is, yeah. United Township, I believe is what they're called, out of Moline. So big school, quite a bit bigger than us, so they have quite a bit of size in both numbers and literally size of the guys. But I think if we play our game, I think we can do okay. So should be a good contest for us going into the playoffs, so we're looking forward to it.
Anxious to see the seedings coming out on Saturday, too, to see where you guys are matched up at?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, we're hoping for a good seed, obviously. But at the end of the day, we got to prove it on the field tonight, I think, or tomorrow night, I should say. So I think that'll be critical for us if we can pull that off. We're hoping to get a pretty high seed, but we'll see how it plays out.
Absolutely. So definitely exciting times there with high school football and getting close to playoffs already next week, man. Can't believe it. So,
came up quick.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, I got I think the first thing I'm going to ask, because I texted you shortly after it happened, Aiden Hutchinson with that injury. I've been telling people if you haven't seen the video and you got a queasy stomach, maybe don't look at it because
that's a tough one.
Yeah, and first of all, the force. I mean, it wasn't like he got hit there. His leg hit his teammate. I mean, that's got to be a lot of force to hit his teammate's leg like that on a whip for it to bend a way it's not supposed to bend.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, for those who haven't seen the video, I mean, it's a pretty graphic fracture, so you see the displacement. So bones are incredibly strong at what's called axial loading. So what they're meant to do, so when you walk and run and you load a bone straight in line, bones are very strong. What they're not strong at is two things. One is rotation, so that's twisting, and so when you get a twisting moment to a bone, they break relatively easily. And the other is just straight, lateral bending forces. So in this case, as he was making that sack, he was literally whipping around, and his leg whipped directly into his teammate's shin, and so it was kind of shin against shin, and that kind of lateral bending moment, the bone just isn't as strong as it is with the loading, and pop, there it went. And then, I mean, yes, it had a lot of force because not only did it break, it kept going, so that's why you saw that leg kind of do that flop move. And we know because the leg flopped like that, it was a fracture of both bones, the tibia and the fibula. And again, that looks like a very horrible injury, and I'm sure it's not fun, right? But interestingly, I mean, that's gonna be an injury that he should bounce back from very well, and I expect him to have, a recovery process, of course, but I expect him to get back to 100% or close to it, despite it being a pretty nasty-looking injury.
So the report was afterwards that he had emergency surgery right after that. And when you hear emergency surgery, you're thinking the worst. So for an injury like that, why would it be emergency surgery to fix it?
Generally with a long bone fracture, we get to them as soon as we can. So, emergencies, I wouldn't say it's like an overblown thing, but it's probably a bit of an exaggeration. Urgent though, but I mean, I think I was talking to some people and I said, I bet you by the end of the day he'll have a nail in that tibia. And that's generally how we treat tibia fractures in the shaft. Like that is a what's called an intramedullary nail or rod. So we make a little incision above the tibia, and we actually kind of core the inside out, so it's called a reaming, and then we slide a titanium rod inside the bone, lines it back up, and links it back. And depending on the fracture pattern, sometimes we're allowing these guys to put weight on it very quickly. So he may even be walking on that leg right away, which is kind of baffling.
Yeah.
But it was, I remember as a medical student, one of the first surgeries I did as on my orthopedic rotation was putting a rod in the femur in this case, but same idea. And I remember the surgeon being like, we're going to let this guy walk on this tomorrow. And I was like, that is the coolest thing in the world. And that's one of the first things that kind of drew me to orthopedics, is just the ability to fix a bone like this and get someone back walking right away. I mean, it's amazing.
Now, I saw some people, and this is social media, so it's kind of a sketchy thing, but some people were saying, is this comparable to Alex Smith's leg injury? And it doesn't seem like that's comparable to Alex Smith's leg injury.
There's differences for sure. I mean, the biggest difference right off the bat is the fact it was a closed injury, meaning the bone didn't come through the skin. So when the bone comes out of the skin, it gets exposed to outside air and bacteria, and that's bad. And so right away, Alex Smith had a much more severe injury. The second thing is that the the injury with Alex Smith had a lot more soft tissue damage with it. And so he had a lot more severe swelling, and so they had to kind of open up the leg with what are called fasciotomies. So there were differences right off the bat. Now, was it the same bone involved? It was. We certainly hope for a different outcome, of course, because you don't want to see anyone go through what Alex Smith went through. But, yeah, I mean, I think the similarities end with it was a tibia fracture, and I think that's about it.
Nick Chubb, you talk about gruesome injuries. He's going to be playing this weekend, it sounds like, after that gruesome knee injury last year that we saw. How surprising, I think we've touched on this before, but the fact that he's going to be on the field right now, how amazing is that for him to go out there? And, I mean, he's got to have some limitations, right? I mean, maybe just kind of working his way back or such, but, I mean, the fact that he's on that field, it's got to be pretty amazing from where he was at last year.
I mean, absolutely 100% amazing. I mean, I take care of these type of injuries like a lot of other sports surgeons out there. And, I mean, multi-ligament knee injuries, knee dislocations, I mean, these are horrific injuries. And, I mean, to be totally honest, when we're treating these people, we're trying to say, all right, let's get this person a stable leg. Let's get them so they can walk the rest of their life and have you know, a reasonable function. I mean, that's truly our goal. Now, will we take a person getting back to sports and stuff? Of course we will, but it's difficult to always achieve that. And so to be able to do it and get back to the NFL, I mean, it is just stunning. Now, we've talked about this in the past. I mean, NFL athletes are just built a little different. That's why they're NFL athletes, right? So, I mean, for him to be able to get back, he's just built different than a lot of people. But absolutely, it's a testament to, you know, what he's rehabbed, the surgeon who took care of him. I mean, everything across the board, impressive for sure.
To the courts, we saw Lonzo Ball last night going up against the Twins. 15 minutes coming off the bench, he scored 10 points. The reason I'm bringing him up is because, well, you know, but for everybody else, this is a guy who's been going through a lot of leg injuries, knee injuries, and such, and he had a meniscus transplant, he said, back in March. Is that from a cadaver, or do they is that one of those where they grow? What's that process like?
Yep, so that is from a cadaver. So a meniscal transplant is a surgery where we take cadaver meniscus. It has to be matched. You can't just take a random one. It has to be matched, so it's size matched to match the size of the person receiving them. And so it's a relatively uncommon surgery. But I do them, for example, you know, but no one's doing, you know, dozens of them a week. I mean, it's going to be a handful a year. But it's a surgery that basically, the patient has a deficient meniscus. So he had a meniscus tear, a meniscal injury. Almost inevitably with that type of injury, you're going to have some level of cartilage wear damage along with it. So it's not uncommon to do it in conjunction with a cartilage procedure. But long story short, we take that meniscus and we basically put it in. So you need to fix it to the tibia and then run stitches all the way around to tack it to the capsule around the edges. So it's a challenging surgery, technically speaking, for the surgeon. But we have good success with it, and it's a surgery that we're able to kind of get people back. It's not always a quote-unquote permanent fix because that meniscus, it'll grow in, but there's still a relatively high reoperation rate. But considering the alternatives, it can be a really good option for some people that are trying to get back to, you know, higher level activities when they have a deficient meniscus.
Is there any risks or chance where the body would reject a meniscus like that?
No, we don't really have that issue in the knee. It's relatively what we call immunoprivileged, so you don't have, you know, blood flowing in the knee. So your synovial fluid doesn't reject things. So when we transplant cadaver tissue into the knees and joints, we don't really have a rejection issue. So as opposed to like a kidney or a liver transplant, we don't have that problem in the knee or any joint for that matter. So
would there be any? I mean, you know, he played 15 minutes last night. This is a guy who's been going through a lot of stuff. Would this be something similar to like when Bakhtiari with all of his knee issues? If he had like, is it something similar to that where he could have had a transplant, something like that?
You know, he was more of a cartilage, if you remember.
Okay.
So he was a cartilage where they did a cartilage. Now his was a Macy procedure, if you recall. That's where they harvest his own cartilage. They send it to a lab, they grow it, and then we reimplant that cartilage.
Gotcha. Okay.
So now so they're different procedures, but in the end, I mean, there are definitely some similarities as far as the recovery process and getting people kind of to build the leg back up, because it's not the procedure getting the tissue to grow. Then you got to get the leg to basically restore its range of motion and strength, which is not always easy. because generally these are knees that have had multiple surgeries on them. So it's often quite a deep hole that you dig, and then they got to build themselves back up. And again, they're not just trying to get back to, hey, I want to walk on the block. It's like, hey, I need to go play a professional sport. So they're pushing their bodies to the limit. So it makes it definitely more of a challenge to get them back. But at the end of the day, again, these people are able to do it just because of who they are.
Right. No kidding here too. So I know to wrap it up, because I know you got to get going here a little bit, but we saw last weekend too, and I know this is not necessarily orthopedic, but Coach Harbaugh had to get some issues done, or he had to go to the blue tent, and we don't usually see a coach leave a game. He did return though. But I mean, does that just kind of tell you the types of medical personnel that these teams have on these sidelines, that he was having a heart issue, and then he's able to get it checked out and gets cleared? I mean, I know you've talked about it before, how many MRIs and X-rays these players probably get and all that. But maybe that's another example of just the type of different medical personnel are on sidelines.
Yeah, so I mean, at an NFL level or Division I, I mean, they have a absolute host of medical providers. So ranging from athletic trainers, often they'll have even EMS or paramedics, and then physicians. Generally, they'll both have a sports medicine and then a medical doctor as well. Once you get to the NFL, often you'll add in either a neurologist or a neurosurgeon for the concussion side. So, yeah, I mean, you could have almost anything happen to you on the sideline. There's probably someone who can take care of you. Now, at the level of like high school, not quite as much. We'll generally have trainers and then sometimes a physician. So it obviously, as you step up the level of competition, you're going to have more personnel on the side. But yeah, it really does. It's a testament that he was able to be taken care of so quickly in a fashion that luckily he was able to kind of get through it unscathed, or relatively speaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know he just said too that his doctors told him he has the heart of an athlete. I don't know if that's true, but
there you go.
I think he's got the mindset of one for sure. So
that I could say, yeah, for sure on that one.
Well, Dr. Curl, we appreciate you adjusting your schedule here. Thank you for taking some time with us. Best of luck tomorrow, and we'll catch up with you next time and talk about the playoffs for your Ramblers and that.
Sounds like a plan. Have a great weekend.